Now here I'm basically going to do a rear view. This is to get more of a perspective on how his uniform works, how his stance is. Since it's going to be modeled later on, I could have done this. I'll be doing an orthographic view later, but I could have done this in a slightly more forefront view in a more normal stance. But the problem with that is it won't get the texture, the feel, and the pose that's key to the way the character looks, acts, and feels basically to the viewer. So in this case, to further express the odd pose and the obscured bits, I'm basically using the original drawing as a guide and then drawing in a perfect reverse view. So sort of an opposite three-quarters view of the same character. So I've basically leveled up the major sections of the character, again starting with the head and the shoulders, the torso leading down. And I usually, again, leave the arms till the end. It's faster going on this simply because the gesture of the entire character has already been planned and decided, and I'm mimicking it at this point. I have to keep the angles of those muskets the same as well, and the proportions pretty similar. Obviously, things can be slightly different because there's a different perspective on them, but the tilt should actually be noticeably the same. Since we'll be touching upon this design from almost every angle, it was important that I understand the elements I was introducing in the first initial front view, and basically understood how they should end up playing out from these different angles. So I had to think about how the two muskets were angled and how one rested on top of the other. And of course, I had to go even farther than that and think about things like how it may appear when he moves. Is it going to hinder his progress too much, the way they're hanging out behind him? That sort of element's key. So here they're almost partly responsible for pulling his torso back in that way. That weight, that sort of that rests on his rear there and sort of pulls the torso. It's important that your design works from these different angles too. I mean, there still has to be elements of interest. He can't just sort of have one good side that looks really cool, and then the rest of them is really boring or looks odd and just doesn't work. Because if he's a character who's going to be moving through a world and seen in all these different sort of positions and situations, it's important that the feel of the design and the success of the design carries through the whole product.